When you're caregiving for a loved one who's going through cancer treatment, it's natural to put yourself in their shoes and debate whether or not you would make the same choices that they did over the course of their treatment, or even if you would have done treatment at all. The conversation that my dad and I have on the way home from Omaha, Nebraska, about whether or not my mom would have chosen to go through treatment had she known at the very beginning when she was diagnosed about all the setbacks and all the suffering that she would experience, and whether or not that we would go through cancer treatment if we were ever diagnosed, is one that we had actually very often over the course of being a caregiver for my mom. Now, having been diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma and having gone through cancer treatment myself, I actually find this conversation to be pretty annoying, and I am aware that it happens all the time. It's something that we do when we see someone else going through a medical crisis. You have to wonder about what you would do in their circumstances, but you're always approaching it from a point of view that is not informed. We had never been sat in front of an oncologist and heard them say, "You have cancer, it's potentially terminal." So who were we to say what we would do, because we had never been in that position? And so you don't understand the full gravity of that moment, and you can't say with any certainty what you would actually do in response to receiving that news. We were even more so not in the position at that moment to make any of those statements because we hadn't even seen the full course of my mom's treatment. There was a reality in which she could have survived. She could still be here today, and we would be all saying, that was so worth it. And this isn't commentary on whether doing treatment or not doing treatment is the courageous pathway forward. Both require a tremendous amount of courage. No, this is about making bold proclamations like my dad did in this moment, where he was saying, "Oh, I wouldn't go through treatment. All the money that you would waste on me, you could just save up, and you and your siblings could invest it into something that would actually contribute to your futures instead of wasting it on me." The logic is just so flawed, because here I am living the reality that I've lost my mom and she can't be alongside of me as I navigate the rest of my life. So my dad is proposing that, that's actually a better circumstance than it would be to go through treatment and potentially remain alive to be with you as you navigate your life, and I can share all these special moments with you still. It doesn't make any sense. And it was not remotely productive. And I know that for a fact because both my dad and I were diagnosed with cancer several years later, and we both elected to go through treatment. Now, I can say that everything I witnessed as a primary caregiver for my mom did weigh on me as I had the prospect of maybe having cancer, and then when I ultimately got the cancer diagnosis. And I say prospect of having cancer because when I initially discovered the first swollen lymph node on my clavicle in October of 2019, I had a very different perspective on the idea of if it were cancer. That moment in time, I was in a very depressed state because I had my life uprooted. I moved to California. I hadn't found a job yet, and nothing had panned out with this book, Losing Linda May, A Cancer Caregiving Memoir. I was in such a low point that I felt like, whatever, maybe this was my destiny. Maybe I was always supposed to just get cancer and die after I had written this book, because then my sister could publish it after I had passed away from cancer myself, and then it would go on to be some bestseller because of the backstory behind it, and then at least I would have a legacy, versus the time that I was living in where I felt like I was in a complete rut that I would never get out of. I do think that I would have still gone through treatment if my diagnosis had come at that very moment. My sister and my brother and everyone else in my life would have not just said, "Oh yeah, Logan, you're right. You're 31 years old. You're going to decline any treatment and you're just going to die prematurely. So yeah, don't do treatment. We fully support that decision." No, I would have had so much pressure on me that I would have for sure gone through treatment. And that's a factor too. So just because I was in a depressive state at the time wouldn't have moved the needle. When I did actually get the diagnosis, there was no question in my mind that I would go through cancer treatment. And now being on the other side of it, I think back to the question that I asked my dad about whether or not he thought my mom would go through treatment if, she knew everything that would happen after. Applying that to myself, if my oncologist would have told me when I was initially diagnosed about all the setbacks I would experience through my cancer treatment, all the chemotherapy regimens I would have to suffer through, the autologous stem cell transplant, and living the rest of my life with the fear that the cancer would just come back, I don't know what I would have done in that moment. I don't know if I would have chosen to go through treatment, because that all would have sounded like a complete shit show, because it was a complete shit show. But I'm very grateful that I had blinders on through that entire experience, so I didn't have to grapple with that question. And I'm very happy that I made the choice that I did, because my life is way better now than it was when I was initially diagnosed. And I'm able to share my book with the world, and I'm able to share some hindsight with you all. I'll be uploading my next video on July 29th, and I'll be talking all about mouth sores. So hit subscribe, leave any questions in the comments. The link to the book is in the description, and I will see you all on the 29th.